So hi, everyone. Welcome to PacView's Q3 2022 CPC report webinar. Just a reminder to everyone that this webinar will be recorded and it will be sent out later today. Also, if you have any questions, please add them to the Q&A box, and we'll get to all of those questions by the end of the presentation. Okay. Just a quick preview of who's going to be speaking today. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael, and I'm a senior customer success manager here at PacView. And I'm also joined today by Jack, who I will let introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jack. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a product manager at PacView, working on building and developing PacView's advertising suite. So excited to be chatting with you all today.
So just a preview of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to kick things off with a quick recap from the Prime Day early access sale. And we're going to then jump to what's new with Amazon advertising. For the second half, we're going to cover Q3 results from Amazon, Walmart, and Instacart, complete with specific category insights. And then at the end, we're going to launch into a Q&A. Like I mentioned before, if you have any questions, just as they come up, please drop them into the chat box, and then we'll get to them towards the end of the call. If this is your first webinar with us, welcome. Just quickly, PacView is the leading enterprise platform for brands, sellers, and agencies looking to manage e-commerce advertising. We work across 30 plus retailers. And our goal is to combine a holistic performance and give you recommended actions in order to maximize the effectiveness of your advertising. If you are interested in a demo, please reach out to us either via the Q&A link or via our website. Okay,
so let's start presentation by kicking off a Prime Day early access recap. So October Prime Day 2.0. We saw a couple of really interesting trends throughout Prime Day 2. And I wanted to highlight a couple of them that really stuck out to me. The first one you'll see on the top left hand of your screen, which is a new sort of beta version of sponsored brand ads, where that video asset, rather than being in the middle of the SERP, is on that top banner, rather than those 3 product collections. This is going to be really interesting to see as we think about Amazon's evolution as an advertising platform. They're leaning more and more heavily on video, and watching that video get an even more prominent placement than in the middle of the page towards the top is going to be an exciting trend to follow going forward. Other sorts of video interactive content, I think, have been really interesting to see as well, looking at the Amazon Live or Amazon influencer programs, seeing how those live streams and interactive shopping experiences continue to drive and push sales. When we're looking at some of the key categories that have been really picking up over the last early access Prime Day event, toys and games is one of those big categories that we saw a lot of growth. According to Amazon's own data, we saw about 8 million toys sold during the US during that 48-hour period from some real top brands like Lego, Melissa & Doug, and Squishmallows, which I am a big fan. When we were looking at this Prime Day event, we're starting to see, and I think is going to be a powerful predictor for buyer behavior in Q4, the impact of inflation on people's buying behaviors. So according to Amazon, 30% of their consumers waited for the sale to purchase an item at a discounted price. So what we saw, that price slash during Prime Day was really helpful in terms of driving that initial traffic when folks are becoming a little bit more price conscious and hesitant to make those non-necessity purchases. Okay, so as we turn the corner and look at some of the things that are new on the Amazon side, I want to do a quick recap for all of y'all about what's new to Amazon advertising and what that means for you as an advertiser as we go into Q4 and think about changing our strategies. So For those of you who have heard me talk in any of our other PAXI webinars, I talk a lot about in past Amazon Marketing Cloud, Amazon's data cleanroom solution. Amazon Marketing Cloud has been developing at a really rapid pace and showing a couple of new interesting features that I wanted to call out for you. The first one is for folks who are trying to utilize Amazon's advertising platform to sell a streaming service. That data is now available in Amazon Marketing Cloud. So rather small group of advertisers, but for those folks, it's a really important data set. The other piece that's coming across is looking at Amazon's shopping analytics data. What this lets you do is, rather than just having your advertising data within Amazon Marketing Cloud, you're also able to pull in your selling partner data, so that the sales and inventory data that you would get from Seller or Vendor Central. There are some really interesting use cases for this as part of Amazon's initial foray into paid data sets for AMC. But the core one in my mind is looking at the difference in sales volume and sales per purchaser based on folks who have seen no ads and folks who are exposed to some ads, to help you sort of get a quick gut check on terms of the incremental value of your media and market. Additionally, Amazon DSP launched its first release for enhanced creative policy guardrails. So this is going to give folks real-time ad policy related feedback during setup. So rather than having you submit your DSP creative, wait a little bit for Amazon to manually review, this is going to be a more in real time moderation of your content. Additionally, the Amazon Ads localization services have been popping up, which is really useful for those folks who are selling across multiple markets. This allows you to translate your sponsor brand video or your content from one language to another in an Amazon provided fashion, which is really valuable for helping brands, especially those in the EU, move across markets with ease without having to deal with those language barriers. And then finally, on this slide, we have the video builder, which allows brands to utilize Amazon's in-house creative sort of services, not more of like a self-service ad video builder, but allows you to show up, say, here's my product, and then Amazon will automatically create a video based on the content within the PDP of that product. All righty. So as we look at more things that are new, there are a couple of interesting pieces in sort of just geographic expansion of things we've already seen in the Amazon ecosystem that are moving into new countries. Amazon attribution is now live in Mexico and the Netherlands. And all of the ad products are now available for use for Amazon in Egypt. We also saw recently that Amazon launched last week their first foray into the Belgium market. So interesting to have another country pop up in the EU. And finally, we saw some improvements for sponsored display for advertisers based in Sweden.
Okay, thank you, Jack. It's now time to jump into some of the results that we saw from Q3 2022, starting with Amazon. So some key takeaways. First off, we saw that ad spend on Amazon increased about 21.6% quarter over quarter. That's a 13.5% increase year over year. This was primarily driven by Prime Day in July. So kind of an expected increase in overall investment quarter over quarter. We also saw that cost per click was pretty stable on Amazon. For sponsored products, average CPC was about $1.17. That is just a 5.6% decrease quarter over quarter, just 3% difference from the previous year. So relatively stable. As we looked at Walmart, we saw a pretty large increase in investment, 16.4% quarter over quarter, and a 27% increase year over year. Earlier this year, Walmart switched to a second price auction, which led to significant performance improvements and efficiencies for brands, which continued during Q3. We think that that might have driven some of the desire to increase investment. Also, backpack was the top search term in August 2022, replacing face mask, which was the most popular term during the 2021 back to school season. So one just indication that we're shifting back to maybe some of the search trends that were more typical prior to the pandemic. Looking at some more differences between 2021 and 2022 in terms of search terms, iPhone cases continue to dominate the most search terms during Q3, as Amazon has typically launched new iPhones during September. Women's fashion dresses specifically popped into the top search terms during Q3 as shopping for clothes on Amazon became more mainstream. And as mentioned before, backpacks replaced disposable face masks as the top back to school term this year. Some quick trends that we were seeing across sponsored products and sponsored brand. We would say that the results were pretty mixed in Q3. Investment went up across both ad types, but click-through rate went down. CPCs also went down slightly, but conversion rate took a quick dip. And as a result, we saw that ROAS improved very slightly for sponsored products, but declined very slightly for sponsored brands. I think this all nets to like generally pretty consistent performance quarter over quarter, at least what would be expected from jumping from a typical Q3 to a Q2 to a Q3 with Prime Day in July. Like we mentioned earlier, there was a significant increase in spend across sponsored products and sponsored brands. We saw sponsored products investment go up 22%. The average daily spend for sponsored products increased by 13.5% year over year. And when we're looking at just sponsored brands, we saw a 17% increase in investment quarter over quarter. And that's just slightly up year over year, but we saw that it was about the same as what we would expect during Q3. Click-through rate also fell slightly. I thought that this was interesting to know. It was the first quarter that we've seen in a while that click-through rate has declined for sponsored products. This is a pretty significant year-over-year decline in click-through rate, about 20% compared to what we were seeing last year for sponsored products. Click-through rate also declined slightly for sponsored brands. We saw about a 5% decrease quarter over quarter. However, sponsored brand click-through rate was actually much higher than it was last year, about 39% increase year over year. Okay. As mentioned before, CPCs decreased quarter over quarter. It was about a 6% quarter over quarter decrease to about $1.17 for sponsored products. Sponsored brands saw a smaller decrease, about 1.3%, but this was actually much higher than what we saw last year during the same quarter. It was about 7% higher.
As we looked towards conversion rates, both for sponsored products and sponsored brands, we saw slight decreases quarter over quarter and year over year. I think this is pretty normal as we would expect, as we went into a Prime season, moving towards the holiday shopping season, we're going to see an increase of traffic and just a slight decrease in conversion behavior as folks sort of do their, pre-Q4 or Prime Day sort of browsing before they go in and make a purchase towards the end of the year. So when we're looking at ROAS for both of these ad types, sponsored product ROAS was up slightly, about 4% quarter over quarter and 3.7% year over year, whereas sponsored brands saw the opposite trend, slightly down quarter over quarter and year over year, down about 2.7%. Net, if we look at the ROAS across a wide quarter spread, it's been pretty consistent in terms of what advertisers can expect from return on the Amazon platform over long periods of time. Okay. Last but not least, we're seeing for CPA, sponsored product ads were up about 4% quarter over quarter, but down 3% year over year. So pretty flat. Whereas on sponsored brands, we saw a pretty marked year over year jump up 11.5%, indicating that there's a little bit more competitiveness in terms of sponsored brand ads. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the category trends for some of our advertisers' top categories. It'll be really interesting to dive in, take a look at how these compare against one another, see if there are any trends we can extract. Okay, so one of the most interesting categories for Q3 is always patio, lawn, and garden, as that's prime time for those folks, as summertime is the sort of their Super Bowl. So when we're looking at that category specifically, we saw sponsored products CPCs down 8% quarter over quarter, and sponsored products CVR up almost 12% quarter over quarter. So it looks like our advertisers were selling in that patio, lawn, and garden space really were able to capitalize on their prime time season operating in those summer months. Okay. So in home and kitchen, another category that I always think is really interesting, we saw sponsored product CPCs down 8% quarter over quarter. So really nice drop off in costs there, with ROAS going up almost 7% quarter over quarter. So our home and kitchen advertisers were really able to capitalize on some of those Q3 trends. I wouldn't take this as gospel, but I think it is interesting to see any sort of home and kitchen category growth, as that's sort of been an interesting pairing in the pandemic, as we see folks who had historically relied a lot on delivery services thinking about, as I enter a recession, maybe cooking is a cost savings measure for me, and seeing those home and kitchen advertisers capitalize on those trends is always an interesting thing to keep tabs on. Okay, finally, looking at clothing, shoes, and jewelry, we saw CPC, CVR, and ROAS all down across the board. When we're looking at sponsored product CPC, they were down about 5%, but CVR was down 8% quarter over quarter. When we're looking at ROAS for those advertisers quarter over quarter, they were slightly down about 3% to an average of still quite strong, about $8.11. So I think we're going to see some interesting trends as we move into Q4 looking at this category. But I would say in Q3, we saw some drop off in terms of buying behavior.
I feel like particularly with higher priced products too, like there's probably going to be quite a bit more shopping around with inflation and also potentially a recession. So thank you, Jack, for walking through some of those category insights. We're going to jump over to Walmart now and talk through some of the trends that we saw in that platform in Q3. First, a quick roundup. Walmart's Chief Revenue Officer, Seth Dallaire, announced a new video ad format is going to be coming soon. It's going to be available in sponsored search, appearing in grid and search and browse pages. The pricing is going to be CPC based, and it's also going to be based off of a second price auction. That's really exciting. Also, kind of follows a consistent trend that we've been seeing where Walmart maybe borrows a bit from Amazon in terms of the ad formats that have been working over there. We've included some creative specs in here just so that you can work to start to prepare some of those assets. Walmart made 2 significant changes to their bid auction in Q2, and we've started to see those results really pull through in Q3. The first is enhanced search relevancy algorithm, which caused more opportunities for ads to show. We saw that immediately there was a boost in scale as a result of that algorithm shift, and generally we've been seeing positive performance there as a result. And then secondly, the update that we've been discussing quite frequently is that shift towards a second price auction. I think what we've been finding there is with that shift, there's been more willingness to invest without worrying about potentially over-investing and spending more than you need to in order to show up in top placements. And that's allowed people or our advertisers to be quite a bit more aggressive. Some other quick updates to be aware of. Sponsored Brands was just released for our marketplace sellers in October. So if you're interested in launching with Walmart sponsored brand placements, definitely talk to your PackView rep. And also the automatic development of a Walmart Ad Center account for third-party sellers. So starting to look into some of the trends that we saw, click-through rates in Walmart continued their ascent after 3 consecutive quarters. Click-through rate increased by 19% quarter over quarter to 0.51% in Q3. Additionally, sponsored ads click-through rate continued to show enormous growth when looking at a year-over-year perspective, about a 42% increase year over year. That just goes to show those improvements that have been made to the relevancy algorithm have really manifested themselves in advertising performance. Additionally, brands have continued to see cost per click drop and become more efficient in Q3. We attribute a lot of this to the shift in the bid auction structure. Looking from a year over year perspective, we're seeing about a 43% improvement in CPCs. So massive improvement in cost savings on Walmart looking year over year. As a result of these trends that we just mentioned, we saw that ad spend on Walmart skyrocketed to its highly average daily spending that we've seen. That's about a 16% increase quarter over quarter, 27% increase year over year. When we're looking at ROAS, we saw about a 44% increase in ROAS quarter over quarter, and a whopping 104% increase year over year. I think that this, if anything, just proves that if you're not currently really investing in Walmart advertising, now is the time to look into it. A lot of those issues that a lot of our advertisers were seeing in the past with efficiencies definitely seem to have improved quite dramatically with a lot of those shifts in the algorithm and the auction methodology.
Thank you so much for covering those really interesting Walmart insights, Michael. I'm going to talk a little bit about Instacart for our Q3 report deep dive, just taking a look at how our advertisers on Instacart have performed. In the last quarter, Instacart has released a couple of really interesting pieces that I think will be helpful for advertisers to get a sense of what Instacart is changing to improve the advertiser experience and help folks with efficiency. So I would start with looking at some of the metrics that Instacart has done a bunch of really interesting press releases about, including sales lift and A/B testing metrics for CPG brands to allow advertisers to run a true A/B test to identify the incrementality of their ads. Also, Instacart has released new customer share and basket share data insights as part of the ISIP data set. So if you are currently an Instacart customer who has access to ISIP, check it out. I think it's definitely going to be really insightful. Additionally, Instacart also released what they're calling a linear multi-touch attribution model, which is meant to be a replacement for traditional last touch attribution. Long story short, it basically applies equal sales value weight to every ad you touch in your journey, rather than just the last one you click on before you purchase, which is really going to help boost the perceived or the platform ROAS for some of those Instacart display ads that aren't really meant to drive conversion, more of a mid-funnel tactic. In the next couple of weeks, you'll see new to brand metrics coming to Instacart. So keep your eyes peeled. These should be a really exciting way for advertisers on Instacart to assess their new to brand growth. As we look at some of the numbers, I think what we're seeing quarter over quarter is overall just sort of decline in performance of our Instacart advertisers. CPCs are up over 8% quarter over quarter, and ROAS is down about 6% quarter over quarter. When I'm thinking through this, what I think is probably the biggest root cause is what Instacart released something called intraday pacing, which allows advertisers to have Instacart automatically spread their budget out over a full day so that they're live for the entire day rather than exhausting their budgets earlier. For our advertisers who on Instacart tend to be larger CPG brands, having those advertisers cap out, their competitors cap out earlier in the day meant some really cheap CPCs towards the end of the day. And now those advertisers that we work with probably aren't benefiting from those late day, fewer auction entrance CPC. As we jump on to looking at average spend on the next slide, we're seeing folks generally pull back on their Instacart ads based on the performance they're seeing in the previous slide. So we saw CPA So we have up about 13% quarter over quarter, and ad spend down about 3% quarter over quarter and about 18% year over year. When we're looking at Instacart ad spend, I think some of our clients have thought through the sort of difficulty that Instacart poses when dealing with a recession. As we were in COVID, Instacart became sort of part of our essential worker infrastructure to allow people to get groceries delivered to their home. And as we sort of move away from pandemic behavior patterns and into, frankly, like more 2008 recession behavior patterns, with back-to-back quarter over quarter GDP decline, we're seeing folks, our consumers, back away from what they're considering like non-essential charges. So getting groceries delivered to your house maybe is more expensive than picking them up for free at your local grocery store. So as we look ahead into Q4, there are a bunch of things that I have in the front of my mind that I want to share with you all, and Michael, feel free to jump in. I think there are a couple really interesting things I'd want to think about towards Cyber 5. So as we think about Cyber 5, we know that the sort of constant talking point from all of our colleagues and from most of the industry influencers has been, just see how the supply chain is going to hold up this year. We're maybe sort of still in some uncertainty with the war in Ukraine, so on and so forth, about like whether the global supply chain can accommodate sort of the influx of traffic that happens right at this short 5-day period. So I think we're going to see some increase year over year in terms of sales and volume and traffic, but hopefully that Prime Day early access sale is going to pull a little bit of that Q4 demand forward so that we're not leaning too hard on the supply chain as we go towards the back end of the Q4. When we're looking at inflation, I want to cite some interesting study that McKinsey rolled out, looking at how folks are responding in their buying behavior to inflation. According to McKinsey, 44% of people told McKinsey that they were delaying purchase of non-essential items. So things like home improvement, footwear, jewelry, things like that, that would be considered non-essential. A large percentage of folks are sort of backing off on those purchasing behaviors. And more than 1/3 of respondents said they were switching to retailers that offer lower prices and better discounts. So as we go into Q4, I think the sort of the retailer loyalty is going to be less consistent than what we've seen in past, and more so to where am I going to get the best deal. So I would be mindful of that price matching across platforms and whatnot. We also saw one interesting sort of canary in the coal mine I'd like to call out. So Dollar General, which we don't hear a ton about in the retail media space, but is a really, I think, an indicative retailer to look at. Their CEO, Todd Vassos, in their most recent earnings call, said that Dollar General was having a much more diverse range of customers than they normally have, with a lot more folks making over 100K shopping at Dollar General. The younger, more affluent folks changing the demographic of who shops at Dollar General, which I think is a really strong indicator of that trend towards, I'm going to look for the retailer where I can get the same goods at the cheapest price. Okay, so as we roll into Q4, there are a couple strategies we wanted to share, just our best practices to make sure you're ready to go and your advertising is up to snuff to capitalize on that Q4 traffic. So first things first is just doing your homework, getting everything set up in advance. So optimizing your keywords, audience strategy, budget, so on and so forth, so that you're ready to rock and roll as you move into Q4. A little bit of prevention is worth a lot more than the cure. So being a little bit more mindful and ahead of the curve in terms of, start planning your Q4 now. If you haven't already, get those campaigns set up, get your keywords and audience strategy ready to go before, we get into the thick of things and it becomes a little bit more challenging to get all of those ducks in a row. Next would be doing your sort of Amazon or retail SEO, taking a look at your product pages and your brand store, doing a store walk, making sure that all of your graphics and titles and texts and A+ content are all ready to go, optimized to make a really appealing buying decision for that consumer. When they hit that detail page, you want it to be an easy conversion. Okay, so when you're thinking about promotional strategy, you really do want to make sure that the products you have on promotion are being supported by your advertising campaigns. So putting them into campaigns that have top of search boosts or your top manual campaigns will help you ensure that your promotional ASINs are visible to consumers. When you're thinking about experimenting, I would take a look at trying out some different ideas in terms of what are some category adjacent or competitor or novel keywords or bidding strategies you haven't tried before. Set aside a segment of your budget, whether that's 5% or 10%, and give something new a go. This is a really great time to get a really interesting set of learnings, as this is going to be a peak of traffic throughout the year. And then last but not least, make sure all your retargeting campaigns, so tracking down folks who have visited your detail pages or interacted with your brand on Amazon DSP or sponsored display, are ready to ramp, as you're going to get a lot of traction in the days following Cyber 5 with folks who maybe interacted with your products but didn't make that purchase decision yet. You can get them back, have them actually check out. Awesome. Okay, so jumping over to the Q&A, it doesn't look like we've had questions submitted through the QA form, but we did get some questions coming in advance. So happy to start there. Okay. So one of the questions we got was, how has Walmart's second price auction changed CPCs across all the categories? Michael, do you want to kick that one off?
Yeah, I think that we've generally found that CPCs declined quite significantly as a result of a second price auction, and I think that that makes sense. A lot of cases in which you maybe were bidding more aggressively than you expected to be. You found yourself being able to win those same terms at a lower cost. And by category, that's been pretty consistent. I think that the largest improvements were going to be seen in categories where maybe CPCs were the highest to begin with. So categories where you're maybe promoting higher priced products versus like lower priced categories like food. But in general, we saw improvements across the board. I think that we can expect that as time goes on, those improvements in CPCs are probably going to be a little bit more modest. Anything to add there, Jack?
No, I think you're right on the money. Some of the questions we got in the chat were about, hey, can we look at CTR or conversion rate as or ROAS when we're thinking about measuring performance on the Walmart side? I think we showed earlier on one of the slides that ROAS on Walmart and CTR on Walmart was up. CTR was up 19% quarter over quarter. So that relevancy shift helped advertisers or helped consumers see the right type of product at the right time. And we're seeing ROAS increases of about 44% quarter over quarter and over 100% year over year. So definitely the changes in relevancy in auction model, as Michael had previously mentioned, definitely are driving stronger performance for advertisers. We know, like when it was previously a first price auction, we had some advertisers like have difficulty with scale or like getting the performance they needed. And I think we've seen like a stark turnaround of those trends for a lot of our advertisers.
Just sort of anecdotally as well, we saw I was at a conference and there was some discussion about the changes in the relevancy algorithm for Walmart. And one of the pieces that was heavily considered was whether an item is on promotion, and having an item on promotion gives you a huge boost to that relevancy algorithm and gives more likelihood that you're going to serve at the top of the search results. Pieces like that would obviously have like quite a heavy improvement on click-through rate. If you're seeing that promotion at the top of the search results, you're much more likely to click through and then convert. So that's just one example of one of the changes that was clearly made and demonstrated just from a couple clients.
Definitely. Okay, so one of the other questions we got was, in the last year, I've seen a considerable increase in CPCs on my branded keywords. As a large manufacturer, I can loosely attribute this to the influx of brands joining Amazon ads. That said, are there better means to own my turf if I continue to drive lower ROI? So I have some thoughts. I think when you're thinking about sort of owning your turf, what you're really talking about is share of voice, right? It's like, of the available impressions for my branded search terms, I want to show up as frequently as possible most of the time. When I'm thinking about sort of when that becomes not efficient, I sort of think of two things. One is like when you're trying to show up 100% of the time, the incremental cost of that between 99% of the time and 100% of the time is a lot more than 70% to 71% of the time, right? As you get closer to maximizing the impressions share, it's going to get more, each percentage point gets more and more expensive. And at some point that stops being profitable. So I think doing some research, and PacView has a really useful tool for this called Bid Explorer, to identify, where is that point in which, it's not worth it to spend that much money on a CPC just to be visible. The other thing I would think about is when I'm thinking about branding keywords, I know there's a lot of contention about whether branded search ads are incremental. And by incremental, I mean, am I influencing someone to buy from my brand if they wouldn't already, or buy something more expensive that they weren't buying previously? So upgrading from the small to the medium, or the 16 ounce to the 32 ounce. I think it depends on your strategy and how you've decided, what products you're advertising on your branded terms. If you're advertising those higher price point products and you're doing a really conscious job of saying, when people come to my brand, when I type in my brand name, I think they're my customer already, and I'm trying to upsell them. I think in those cases, that's a really effective way to defend your turf. Whereas just advertising your top seller, even if it's not your upsell product, might not be the best way to go.
I think that the other key as well is just making sure that you're diversifying the ways that you protect your brand. Always bidding on like a broad match version of your branded term can get pretty expensive if a competitor decides that they're going to conquest you. Making sure that you're investing in other strategies, still using long tail keywords, even if they're branded terms, looking into product targeting yourself to upsell into your higher price products, as Jack mentioned, because one way that a lot of competitors will try to conquest isn't necessarily by winning your branded terms, but by product targeting you with conquesting. So that's another way that you can invest in brand defense that might not necessarily be quite as expensive.
Yeah, that's a really great call out, Michael. Herbert asked, is there a handout / reference material today's webinar? Yes, already live on PacView's website is the ebook version of PacView CPC report that you can download and read. And it contains most of the content we talked about today, plus some more.
Cool.
Okay. We have time for one more question. What do we think?
Yeah, I think so. Looking at some of the pre-questions, what do you think it will be the Q4 CPC year-over-year trends on Amazon advertising based off of what the year-to-date trend has been so far, but also considering there will be an additional event compared to last year? If we talked about it a little bit, but I think that generally, we do see that Q4 is a pretty competitive quarter on Amazon just because of the increase in traffic going into the holiday season. I think that it's tough to predict right now how the second Prime event is going to influence overall CPCs. We can probably assume that from what we've seen that that would be it was more competitive compared to a typical time without a Prime event. But what I'm curious to see is whether Prime Day whether Black Friday, Cyber Monday is going to end up being a little bit less competitive than a typical Black Friday, Cyber Monday, considering there was that earlier event. I think it will be interesting to see. I don't necessarily have a prediction. I'm not sure about you, Jack.
Yeah, across my brands that I've seen, most of them didn't lean in really hard from a promotional strategy standpoint for our fall Prime Day event, so that they didn't have a ton of deals or promotions going on or coupons or whatnot, as they had sort of already scheduled them for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and didn't have the extra wiggle room to get that off the ground for fall Prime Day event. So I think we'll see. I think it's going to really just be determined like category by category, and whether your competitors have decided that they really wanted to lean in on the fall Prime Day event, or if there's like banking on Black Friday, Cyber Monday to be the tentpole event of the Q4.
Cool. Any other last minute questions? If not, just want to reiterate, if you have any questions about PackView, please visit our website, www.packview.com, or reach out to sales@packview.com. If you currently are already a customer and have any questions about some of the material in the report, please reach out to your customer success manager. Okay. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining, and have a great rest of your day.